Well, a meeting between former President Jacob Zuma and the ANC's top 6 leaders is now on the cards. But it's unclear how the party will deal with Zuma's refusal to appear before the State Capture Commission, especially after the Constitutional Court ordered him to appear. Deputy Chief Justice Raymond Zondo said the Commission would refer the matter back to the highest court, seeking an order that would impose a prison term on Zuma. Now, in a letter from his lawyers, Zuma has argued that he did not have to appear before the Commission, the panel, because his request that Zondo recuse himself was still under review. He's also attacked Zondo, he's attacked the Constitutional Court as well as unnamed judges in South Africa, and he involved current President Cyril Ramaphosa, saying some judges have helped him to hide what on the face of it seems to be bribes obtained to win an internal ANC election. To discuss tonight, we're joined by political analyst Prince Mashele as well as Professor Pierre de Vos, who is the Claude Leon Foundation Chair in Constitutional Governance at UCT. Thank you both, gentlemen, for being with me. Professor de Vos, if I may start with you, let's just quickly look at the legal argument. Former President Zuma argues that his case trying to compel the Deputy Chief Justice Zondo to recuse himself is still under review. That's why he doesn't have to appear. So I'd like to clear this up. Was the review brought up in arguments before the Constitutional Court? And was the Constitutional Court very clear that despite that review being underway, Zuma should still appear before the Zondo Commission?
Well, the Constitutional Court referred to the review that was taking place. It wasn't argued because the former president decided not to go to the Constitutional Court to give his side of the case. So the former president himself decided not to make that argument. But legally, that's irrelevant. The Constitutional Court has issued the order, and the order must be obeyed. One cannot argue. It's not a legal argument to say there's another process underway, and so the court order need not be obeyed. That's not how the law works.
All right, so you're saying this is a non-argument. Mr. Mashele, beyond that legal argument, there were a lot of claims made in Zuma's letter through his lawyers, serious claims to be made by a former president. So let's just look at it. He's not only suggesting that the current president, Ramaphosa, has been bribed, but that judges are also on the take. He says judges don't want the financial records revealed because it will show their hands full of the proverbial 30 pieces of silver. Is there evidence in your mind that judges have a political agenda, that judges in South Africa have protected President Ramaphosa and have even been treasonous?
Well, if there were evidence to that effect, the person who was supposed to produce it would be Jacob Zuma himself, who is making the allegations. As far as I am aware, there is no such evidence. And I think there isn't, because even the person who's making the allegations, that is Jacob Zuma himself, has failed to produce evidence. This is what I think he is doing. He is trying to create a political crisis that must affect 2 or 3 institutions. Institution number 1, he is trying to delegitimize the judiciary so that in the eyes of society, the judiciary is viewed as being biased and unfair against himself, Jacob Zuma. That's the first institution he wants to attack. The second institution is that of the state as a whole. The fact that he goes for the state president and basically accusing him of having collected bribes in order to win the elections in the ANC. He wants to delegitimize the president as someone who committed fraud all the way to the union buildings. So essentially, Jacob Zuma is trying to create a political crisis in order to escape his legal troubles.
All right, so to you, this is a pure diversion, but like you say, it could affect the discourse in our nation. It could change people's hearts and minds. So, Professor de Vos, let's look at what happened with those financial records relating to the current president. The public protector said there could be dodgy payments. I think she even mentioned money laundering. Ramaphosa is appealing and said that there was third-party information there. Maybe it was obtained illegally. legally. Is there anything wrong with that judgment, whereby the judges sealed those financial records?
Well, technically, there is an argument to be made that the records could be sealed for all the reasons that the court said. I think the court was wrong in that case because the document has already been leaked in the first place. And when you have to balance the various interests, the right to freedom of expression and the right to know and accountability and transparency, I think, should trump the rights of the donors in this case. So I do think that the court made a mistake there, as courts do, but that doesn't mean that the court was bribed or whatever. That's a preposterous thing. One can easily disagree about a judgment, especially one where the court is asked to balance various interests. I think the court balanced the interests wrong in that case, but that is now neither here nor there. It doesn't actually speak to the fact that the former President Zuma, had a court order ordering him to go and testify, and he decided he was not going to obey the law, that he's above the law.
Professor, staying with you, you're saying you disagree with the case, the information has been leaked. Perhaps it could make the president politically vulnerable. I don't know if white-owned companies are big donors here, but that also isn't evidence, receiving donations isn't evidence of bribery, correct?
Well, bribery happens when there's evidence that somebody offered gratification, so money, and with the intention to get something in return. So that is important. So you have to prove that there was an intention to get something in return, and that the parties knew this. So that would be, in this particular case, with the evidence before us, I can't imagine any court is going to convict. Of course, that doesn't mean that things might not come out later, but at the moment, just because somebody got money doesn't mean there's a corruption. If somebody donates money to my educational fund, that in itself doesn't mean that there's a corrupt activity. You have to show there was an intention to get something in return. If you cannot show that, then your allegations of corruption are not going to stand up.
But Mr. Mashele, let's look at this politically. President Ramaphosa came in on this ticket of being anti-corruption and also very open and transparent. That's how he presents himself, with nothing to hide. Should we be asking why he doesn't want those financial records to be opened?
Well, those records, the donations must have been made under confidentiality agreements. And that, by the way, is something that before the latest act that the president signed into law was allowed in South Africa. In other words, any human being in South Africa wanting to stand for political office could seek donations from private individuals. So, and by the way, if you think of it in the context of the contest between him and Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma, even Nkosazana Dlamini Zuma did exactly what Cyril Ramaphosa did. It is actually very strange that Jacob Zuma only singles out Cyril Ramaphosa and he says nothing about his ex-wife who did exactly the same thing. That said, you are right. Given the fact that Cyril Ramaphosa has been telling us and projecting himself as Mr. Clean, I think he should have actually walked the talk by revealing the donations made to him, if he wants us to believe that indeed he believes that he's an anti-corruption crusader and he is clean. If he doesn't do so, and he hasn't done so far, it suggests that he's actually not Mr. Clean and is not different from the rest of the other politicians who hide things.
All right, thank you, and I'm glad you've brought up both sides. What do you say to that, Professor de Vos? You said the court should have said open those financial records. Wouldn't that have created this huge political imbalance? I mean, there's even been claims at the Zondo Commission that state funds were donated to one of the parties there.
Yeah, you see, that's not how courts work. Courts don't think about the political consequences and then make a ruling based on that. They have to follow the principles. In this case, the real problem is that up until now, political party funding has not been regulated in any way. And even today, funding given to a candidate who stands for office for a political party inside the party, that funding is not regulated. There is no obligation of anybody to reveal their sources. So if I stand to become a member of the patriotic party, and I get money from somebody here, nobody needs to know about that. I can hide it because there's no regulation. That's, of course, a problem, because if you then get into office and you have received money and we as the public do not know about it, then if you are going to be corrupt, it would be easy for you to do so without any scrutiny from the public. That's why these kind of financing of political campaigns, whether it's national election campaigns or campaigns for political office within a party, I think should be far more transparent than it is now.
Let's just be clear, those financial records may be open depending on how the case proceeds between the President and the Public Protector, right?
I'm not sure where we are now. I think there is a court procedure underway to review that, but I have not read or heard anything about the latest developments in that.
Mr. Mashele, if former President Zuma is trying to create a political crisis, even a constitutional crisis, you laid this out as a huge diversion, his attack on the judges. What should the current President, Cyril Ramaphosa, be saying or doing, considering that his critics always have that CR17 funding up their sleeves?
Look, we have a situation currently where you have an ex-president who is basically giving the state or showing the state or our constitutional democracy the middle finger. That's essentially what he's doing. He says to our constitutional system, there is nothing you can do to me. Of course, we know that there is a process that the commission is following. In other words, going back to the Constitutional Court, seeking the Constitutional Court to impose a sentence. But that is a legal process, and that process must be allowed to unfold. But there is also a very important aspect relating to politics, which is the credibility crisis that our constitutional democracy is being subjected to. That, in my view, is the political responsibility of the sitting president to assure the public that we must not worry. Our republic is in good hands and our institutions are not deterred. So I would expect him in that spirit to actually address the nation and tell us that state institutions will not be weakened, will not be undermined by anybody, including a former president. He doesn't have to get into details of the case, because that is a matter that needs to be handled by the commission and Jacob Zuma. So we are in a situation where people are worried in South Africa. We're no longer sure if the leadership of our country is in control, or if the leadership of our country has not been shaken by the attacks that Jacob Zuma is making on our constitutional system. I would expect the president to assure us.
Professor, last word to you. Do you agree? I mean, this isn't a legal argument, but in your opinion, how should the president deal with this? If many South Africans start believing that judges are tainted, surely that has huge implications for social cohesion and the way our democracy works. And I mean, court decisions have gone for the former president on several occasions.
Yes, so I'm not a politician, but I will say this. It is important for people to understand that if you are any person, whether you are a former president or whether you're somebody who has been ordered by the court to pay maintenance for your child, if you don't obey the court order, you are basically attacking the whole system, and it could lead to the collapse of the system. So it's very dangerous. Now, this must be dealt with by the government. I see that the Minister of Justice has issued a strong statement. but it also obviously has to be dealt with within the governing party. That is not for me to say, but I will say this. Voters have a right, of course, to judge the governing party and its president on what they do or not do about this full frontal attack on the law and on the constitution of democracy.
Well, Mr. Mashele, final word to you. We have 1 more minute or so, because this apparently will go to a meeting between Jacob Zuma and the top 6. Will it suggest that the ANC is very weak if it cannot make the former president abide by the law?
He is acting the way he does because he thinks that the ANC leadership is very weak. And in fact, he is actually communicating a message to the leadership that he does not respect the party's leadership, because there is a standing resolution of the NEC of the ANC that instructs all members of the ANC to respect the Zondo Commission. And that is exactly what he is going against. So the meeting that is going to take place between him and the leadership of the ANC, I don't think is going to bear any fruits. In any case, the spokesperson of the family, Edward Zuma, I listened to his clip this afternoon, has already made it clear that his father is not going to change his position. So this is a useless meeting in my view. Zuma has no respect for the ANC leadership, which is why he's attacking the party's president in that statement that he released yesterday.
All right, well, we'll follow how that meeting goes. Thank you for your analysis tonight, legal and political. That was political analyst Prince Mashele and Professor Pierre de Vos, the Claude Leon Foundation Chair in Constitutional Governance at UCT.